They say it takes less than an hour for the human body to die of hyperthermia when it is exposed to extreme cold. Most people look at heavily snow-covered regions and wouldn't even dream of venturing into such areas without proper clothing. But in 1959, 9 experienced skiers were found dead, without proper clothing or covering in the Ural Mountains of Russia. And that's the least scary part about the incident. Before their demise, they had set up a tent on the eastern slopes of Kholat Syakhl. A search party found ready-made food left uneaten, and the clothes and hardware of the skiers in the tent, and there was some evidence of the tent being ripped from the inside out, as if the trekkers were running away from something. Some of the bodies were found with crushed ribs and skulls. Some had internal bleeding and radioactive clothes. Others had their eyes and tongue missing, leaving one question in the minds of every examiner and investigator. What caused the demise of these 9 trekkers? To this day, no one knows for sure, so the case was labeled as a compelling unknown force that this group could not overcome, and then the Russian government abruptly closed the case and labeled it top secret. So in this video, I'll be telling you about the horrible incident at the Dyatlov Pass. To understand how the 9 victims wound up in the Ural Mountains in the first place, you'll have to go back to January of that same year. It was around this time that this group got together for what would be their last expedition of their life. And for what? Hiking and skiing. These 9 persons were students of the Ural Polytechnic Institute. They had assembled for this trip, and the leader of this expedition was a 23-year-old engineer in the name of Igor Dyatlov. The group initially had 10 people, consisting of 8 men and 2 women. It should be noted that they were all level 2 skiers, and this was not their first trip. In fact, they were all expected to receive an upgrade to level 3 skiers upon their return. They arrived at Lidl on January 23, 1959, and took a truck to Vyazhai, a small village in the area, which happened to be the last inhabited section of the north. From there, they were to begin their trek to the mountains. They spent some time in Vyazhai. We know this due to the photos they took and the notes they left in their journals. They had purchased enough food and supplies for their to and fro trip to the Ural Mountains. By January 27, they started their trek. It was at this point that one of the members, Ural, who had a congenital heart defect, decided to turn back due to his ailment as well as his joint pains. Yuri stayed back in Vyazhai, not knowing that his illness had just saved his life. By January 28, the rest of the group continued their trek. Igor was meant to send a telegram to their sports club by February 12, which was the time that they were scheduled to arrive back in Vyazhai. But Igor had informed Yudin that they might arrive later than that. For this reason, Yudin wasn't so worried when the group did not arrive by February 12th. By the 20th, the relatives and family members of the trekkers started getting worried, and they reached out to Ural Polytechnic, who proceeded to organize a search and rescue for the students. Soon, the police and the military got involved, with planes and helicopters all joining the search for the trekkers. The search continued till February 28th, when the damaged tent of the group was found on a hill called Kholat Syakhl. And what the search party found has baffled investigators for a long time. Their tent was badly damaged, but the belongings such as clothes and ski hardware were all inside the tent. There was also ready-made food left uneaten in the tent. But what was initially most troubling was the fact that the tent had been ripped from the inside out, indicating that the campers were in a rush to exit. Next, they found footprints leading out of the camp. The footprints showed some were barefoot, some with one shoe, and some wearing socks. What's even more puzzling is that there was no indication of a rush or any concrete evidence that showed that the campers were running away from something. The footprints led to a Siberian pine tree 500 meters from the campsite. Underneath the tree were the remains of a makeshift fire. There they found the first 2 bodies. They were both males, and their names were Krivonashenko and Doroshenko. Some of the branches in the pine tree were bent and broken, indicated that someone had attempted to climb the tree. One of the bodies found had 3rd-degree burns, and a chunk of flesh was in his mouth, as if he had tried to eat his own flesh. Where were the others? 3 other bodies were found a few hundred meters from the tree. These were the bodies of Slobodin, Kolmogrova, and the leader, Igor Dyatlov. They were found in the snow with their bodies in a position that suggested that they were attempting to return to camp. Seeing that the temperature at the time of the trek was negative 30 degrees below freezing, these persons met their end as a result of hyperthermia. So far, 5 persons have been found. So what happened to the other group members? The remaining 4 persons weren't found until 2 months later. On the 4th of May, 4 bodies were recovered in a snow ravine about 13 feet deep and 75 meters from the pine tree. They had attempted to build a shelter, as there was even evidence of a bed made out of branches, and some were even wearing the clothes of the already found bodies. In this particular set, one of them had major skull damage, the other two had chest fractures, and one of them was missing a tongue. A doctor who examined the bodies stated that none of these damages, except for the missing tongue, could have been caused by human force. These injuries were likened to those sustained during a car crash, but seeing that the trekkers were neither in a car nor anywhere close to one, we can rule that out as a cause. Further autopsies showed that some of the campers were intoxicated during their death, and some of their clothes had suspicious levels of radiation. What that means is that these clothes were emitting electromagnetic waves at frequencies and quantities that shouldn't normally be emitting. Now, to do a quick recap, 9 experienced hikers camped on a hill. Sometime at night, something happened that was serious enough to force them to cut a hole on the side of their tent and run into the open cold of -30 degrees with less than appropriate clothing. The question is, what did they encounter? There were no other footprints other than the prints of these 9 hikers. Most of them met their end due to hyperthermia, burn marks, as well as autosarcophagy, and some were lost due to internal bleeding and a skull fracture. So what happened? Over the years, so many theories have been posited as the cause of this incident. Some have said that it was the abominable snowman or the Yeti that did them in. But remember, most of the campers died of hyperthermia, and there were no other discernible footprints that suggested that a Yeti or any other wild animal was present. It's not like the Yeti is going to cover his tracks. Another theory is that it could have been aliens, as one of the photos the trekkers took was of some strange lights that have been hitherto unidentified. These strange lights were also spotted by some other campers on the night in question who were not too far from Kholat Syakhl. If the campers encountered an extraterrestrial or UFO, perhaps it could be why they left the camp, but if it was really an alien, it doesn't seem like the campers would have tried to return to camp, or try to start a fire in a place that wasn't far enough from a supposed alien predator. Some suggested that these could have been solar flares, or even a Russian missile, seeing that this incident occurred on the heels of the space race. The Russian military had attested to having no missile test being conducted at the time, but it could be that they were not being completely honest and this could all be a military cover-up. Furthermore, even though the investigation was closed in 1959 and the cause ascribed to an unknown compelling force, the investigation was eventually reopened in 2019, and an avalanche was declared as the cause of their demise. It was posited that the campers, who were probably inebriated, feared they were about to be hit by an avalanche, causing them to run out of their tent. Upon realizing that there was no threat, they attempted to return to their tent and died of the cold. But this still did not explain things, the missing tongue, or even the radiation, which some say was because some of the hikers had worked and lived in areas with a nuclear power plant. There are still so many unanswered questions, and perhaps we'll never get those answers. Still, it was a tragic loss to the school, community, and families of these hikers. The Kholat Syakhl region was closed off from hikers and skiers for 3 years after the incident, and to this day that region, where the campers lost their lives, is known as the Dyatlov Pass.